Hello and welcome. My name is Tsuki, and this is my guide to the Astrologian, one of the 3 healers currently in Final Fantasy XIV Heavensward. The Astrologian is the newest healer to be added to the game, and one of the more difficult jobs to play efficiently, I feel. It is a healer with very heavy emphasis on party support, and because of this, their healing capabilities are very basic and condensed in comparison to the other 2 healers. Their support comes from their 6 different cards, which can be drawn at random every 30 seconds, and can be further used and manipulated for better and different effects. This adds another layer of snap judgment to the job, which can be difficult for players starting the Astrologian for the first time. My goal is to provide you with the proper knowledge you need to make these judgments on your own, and to still fulfill your healing role with a smaller healing toolkit than the other 2 healers. As you're watching, please keep in mind that this guide will be filled with my own personal opinions and styles of healing, so remember that you do not always have to agree with me, but good players should be open-minded to different styles of gameplay to better add or to mold your own unique style. So with that said, let's get started with the actual guide by looking at each of the Astrologian's abilities. This will be assuming you are level 60 already and have the traits and best forms of all of your abilities, but this can still be a great tool for helping you as you are leveling. Malefic deals unaspected damage with a potency of 150. If your damage over time effects are already on the target, you should be using this as filler for damage. Benefic restores a target's HP with a potency of 400. This will be your main and go-to spell for healing party members who have taken small to moderate amount of damage. Casting this spell will also grant you a 15% chance to proc Benefic 2 that will have no cast time. Combust applies a damage over time effect to the target that deals 40 potency unaspected damage every 3 seconds for 18 seconds. The total potency is 240. This also has no initial damage, so it can bypass accuracy requirements. Apply this on single targets before using Malefic as filler. Lightspeed is the first real unique ability the Astrologian has, and it reduces MP costs of all spells by 25%, the cast time of all spells by 2.5 seconds, and reduces the attack potency of all spells by 25%. This lasts for 10 seconds. This is a good healing cooldown as it allows you to throw out heals at a faster rate for a lower cost, and you can do so while moving. The effect reduces spell cast by 2.5 seconds, but even spells such as Aspect of Helios that have a cast time of 3 seconds by default can still be casted nearly instantly and while moving due to the latency in the game. However, a point to keep in mind is that while it is a decent healing cooldown, it has no effect on your damaging spells. Some people will see the reduced attack potency and think that Lightspeed will reduce your damage if you use a damaging spell while it is active, and that is true, but it also reduces your spell costs by the same amount, meaning that it is still the same amount of MP per potency to cast a damaging spell. So you shouldn't feel like you're being inefficient by using damaging spells with Lightspeed, although the option is there to manually click off the buff when you want to go back to dealing damage again. Luminiferous Aether will reduce your enemy generation and add an MP refresh with a potency of 80 that lasts for 15 seconds. This ability is very similar to White Mage's Shroud of Saints, restoring the same 2010 MP over its duration or 402 MP every 3 seconds. The biggest difference, however, is that instead of halving your enmity, Luminiferous Aether will only reduce your enmity that you generate in its duration. This approach is less effective than Shrouds in my opinion, but the main thing to take away from this is that you'll want to use it before throwing out large amounts of damage or healing rather than after most fit like you would with Shroud. However, like with Shroud, the MP refresh is usually the more valuable half of the cooldown, so use this whenever your MP pool is missing enough to restore all the cooldown can offer without filling up your MP, and then use it periodically as it comes off cooldown. I'd also recommend pairing this with Celestial Opposition, but I'll explain that later on. Helios will restore the HP of you and all party members around you with a potency of 300. This is good for when small to moderate AoE damage hits the party, or if multiple party members have taken damage. It is also good to cast this if the party takes damage and either the regen or barrier version of Aspect of Helios is not enough to offset the damage alone. Ascend will revive a dead party member in a weakened state that reduces all of that party member's stats by 15% for 2 minutes. If they die again with this weakness and are revived again, you'll get a Brink of Death status, which reduces all of their stats by 30%. As some of you should know by now, I have a firm stance on reviving dead party members. If someone ever dies during a fight or encounter and needs to be revived, it is because something went wrong. There are no scripted deaths in any fights unless it is an rage that wipes the entire party, meaning that all deaths can be avoided and mitigated if everyone handles mechanics and the responsibilities properly. Reviving a dead party member will cost a lot of MP, and will probably burn your swift cast, which could be better used elsewhere. If they are successfully revived, they will have a weakened status and only a portion of HP, MP, and TP to get back into the fight. It takes a lot of resources to revive a dead party member, so if you do decide to revive them, make sure to make it count, otherwise you'll only be setting yourself and the rest of the party back even more if you revive them and they die immediately afterwards again. Essential Dignity will restore a target's HP with a potency of 400 and is instant cast. It has a cooldown of 40 seconds and its potency will increase to lower the target's HP. This ability screams to be used to extend your Cleric stance sessions. Of course, the immediate thought is that it is a soft panic button, and it is, but it is specifically designed to be used as a low HP heal and to be complemented with an actual healing spell afterwards if needed, since it is an ability and instant cast. The potency increase is no joke, as some have calculated to increase to about 1000 potency if the target HP is low enough. It is definitely one of the best abilities in the Astrologian's toolkit. However, keep in mind that this is a healing ability, so things such as Defiance or Convalescence, which increases incoming heals, or Sinistry, which increases your outgoing healing spells, will not affect this ability. Exalted Detriment will remove one detrimental effect from the target. Keep in mind that just because a detrimental effect is on a party member, that does not mean you need to dispel it off. There are definitely high priority debuffs that should be dealt with immediately, but there are some that are so weak or non-hindering that it is almost a waste of MP to dispel them. Some things, such as weak poisons, can be healed through, and others don't have a long enough duration and can be left to wear off on their own. And some can't even be dispelled. As a healer, be sure to keep note of important debuffs that should be dealt with immediately, and those that aren't worth the cast time. Stella deals unaspected damage with a potency of 100 and adds a 40% heavy to a target that reduces their movement speed. I'm going to be completely honest, while the heavy effect can be useful in a select fights, I never use this spell and hate that it even exists. Considering that all but 2 abilities we talked about so far are pretty much copies of abilities the White Mage has, I don't understand why they couldn't add this heavy effect to Malefic like it is with White Mage's Stone, and give us a more useful and well-deserved ability that is unique to the Astrologian. To be fair, Malefic does do 10 more potency than Stone does, but this seems like a sorry tactic to split one ability into 2 to fill an ability slot because they couldn't come up with something creative and balanced enough to give the Astrologian. Benefic 2 restores a target's HP with a potency of 650. This is not a replacement for Benefic, as it costs more than double the MP to cast than Benefic, while only doing 250 more potency. Benefic 2 should be used when someone has taken a moderate to large amount of damage and needs a bigger heal to reduce the risk of dying. Keep in mind that casting Benefic has a 15% chance to proc Benefic 2. This proc makes Benefic 2's cast time instant, but it still costs the full amount of MP. So even if this procs, still do not use this unless you actually need the bigger heal. Draw will allow you to draw one of 6 different cards with varying effects. This sits on a 30-second cooldown and will not begin cooling down until after the card drawn has been used. The card drawn will remain there for 15 seconds or until it is used or used with a different ability. I will save draw and all other abilities relating to your cards for a separate section of this guide, so let's move on for now. Diurnal Sect is one of 2 permanent stances you can choose to be in and is obtained at level 30. Activating Diurnal Sect will add regen effects to any spells that have aspected in the name, and will allow you to use your collective unconscious ability. Being in Diurnal Sect will also give you a passive 5% attack speed bonus. Nocturnal Sect is your second of your 2 permanent stances and is obtained at level 50, although I figured it's best to talk about it now. Activating Nocturnal Sect will add barrier effects to any spells with aspected in their name and will allow you to use your collective unconscious ability. Being in Nocturnal Sect will also give you a passive 5% bonus to healing potency. I will talk about and compare the two sects in the later part of the guide. Aspected Benefic is an instant cast spell that has two different functions depending on the sect you're in, so I will talk about this as it is two different spells. Firstly, while in Diurnal Sect, it will restore the HP of a target with a potency of 190 and add a regen effect that restores 140 HP every 3 seconds for 18 seconds with a total potency of 1030. To compare this to White Mage's regen, it has a slightly lower regen effect but comes with a base heal, and it totals up to be 20 potency less than regen's total potency, but lasts for 3 seconds less and costs slightly more MP. If in Diurnal Sect, I recommend using it similarly to White Mage's regen, and that is using it on targets taking constant damage over its full duration, or to heal someone who took a large spike of damage and doesn't need their HP immediately to survive. This does cost slightly less MP than Benefic 2 and heals for a lot more. Also keep in mind, if you are ever paired with another Astrologian, that two Diurnal Aspected Benefics cannot be placed on the same target. If an Aspected Benefic is already on a target and a second one is casted, it will just overwrite and replace the current effect. So keep that in mind and try to be in separate sects if you are ever healing with another Astrologian. In Nocturnal Sect, it will restore the HP of a target with a potency of 250 and add a barrier effect that nullifies damage equal to 130% of the HP restored. The Nocturnal version is similar to Scholar's Adloquium, costing less MP, being instant cast, and having a smaller heal. However, calculating the heal and the barrier potency together, Nocturnal Aspected Benefic is actually very slightly better than Adloquium if Adloquium does not crit, while being instant cast and costing less MP. The math is there, but this is not a comparison video, so I'm getting a bit carried away. If you're in Nocturnal Sect, you can use this to help with large spike damage and to keep party members with less HP or gear alive for damage intensive moments. You can use it before each pull to soak some of the damage the tank may take at the beginning of each fight or trash, and you can use it to help catch up on healing in general, as the barrier will halt HP depletion of a tank or person taking damage for a short time, which can buy you enough time to get off a Benefic or Benefic 2. Like with Diurnal effects, Nocturnal barriers will not stack with another Astrologian's, so coordinate if you are healing with another Astrologian. Also, if you are in Nocturnal Sect and paired with a Scholar, barrier effects cannot be stacked with the Scholar's Galvanize effects. Royal Robe will take a card you have drawn and place it back into your deck, and give you an enhancing effect on the next card you use. This effect depends on which card you return, and will last until you use a card, click off the effect manually, or Royal Road a different card. Royal Road's cooldown is 15 seconds, although this doesn't really matter since it will always be available whenever you draw a card. Again, I will talk about this more later in the card section of this guide. Disable will reduce the potency of a target's action by 10% for 6 seconds. This sits on a 1-minute cooldown. Disable is a great ability for reducing large spike damage. It is good against any type of damage, physical or magical, and can be stacked with Virus. Timing this ability is very important, but a 6-second window is pretty forgiving, so just be paying attention to the boss's rotation and cast bar, and it should be fairly easy to use this ability effectively. Spread will take your currently drawn card and store it away indefinitely until you decide to use it. The cooldown of Spread is 60 seconds, but it will not begin cooling down until after you have used the card you have spread. Note that when you spread a card, Spread will be replaced with the card you have stored away, so press the Spread key again to use this card and begin its cooldown. Again, I will talk about this later in the card section of this guide. Aspected Helios is an AoE healing spell with two different functions depending on which sect you are currently in. While in Diurnal Sect, it will heal you and all nearby party members with a potency of 200 and add a regen effect that heals 40 potency every 3 seconds for 30 seconds. The total potency is 600. In comparison to White Mage's Medica 2, the regen potency is 10 less every 3 seconds, and the overall heal is 100 potency less. Also, the range of Aspected Helios is only 15 yalms, while Medica 2 is 20 yalms. This is great for dealing with large AoE damage or constant AoE damage. However, be cautious of how much enmity this spell can generate, especially during ad spawning phases. In Nocturnal Sect, this spell restores the HP of you and all party members around you with a potency of 150 and adds a barrier that nullifies damage equal to the amount of HP restored. Compared to Scholar Sucker, it is equivalent in potency, effect, and MP cost. However, due to Nocturnal Sect's passive 5% healing potency increase, it is again slightly more effective. This can be used before large AoE damage goes out or right after to hold the HP depletion to cast larger healing spells such as Helios or some other AoE healing spell from another healer. Shuffle will take your currently drawn card, shuffle it back into your deck, and then draw a second time. Since you are drawing a second time, draw will not begin cooling down until after you have used the second card drawn. Also, since you are shuffling a card back into your deck, it is possible to draw the card you just shuffled in, so keep that in mind. Again, I will go more in depth with shuffle in the card section of this guide. Combust 2 will add a damage over time effect to a target that deals unaspected damage with a potency of 45 every 3 seconds for 30 seconds. Since this spell has no base damage, it can bypass accuracy requirements. Total potency is 450. Cast this alongside Combust 1 before using Malefic spells as filler. Sinistry will add a buff to you and a party member you target. Any single target heal you give to a party member will also give 40% of that heal to the target of Sinistry, even if you are healing the target of Sinistry themselves. To clarify, if you heal the target of Sinistry with a single target heal, they will get 140 potency of that heal. Additionally, this increases your healing potency by 20% and lasts for 20 seconds. While I still think Astrologian has the weakest healing toolkit in the game, this is arguably the strongest healing cooldown in the game if used properly. You can use this to gain healing potency for larger heals in any situation, especially on diurnal regens. You can use it to heal 2 targets at once, or you can use it to essentially give a single target massive heals. Something to keep note of is that the person with Sinistry must be within range of you to receive the 40% healing benefit of Sinistry. So, for example, in Alexander Burden of the Father, if the tank with Sinistry is in quarantine and you heal someone, they will not be given the 40% heal because they are out of range. Also, another thing to note of is that the regen ticks and AoE heals do not trigger the effect of Sinistry. And again, you must have a party member to target to activate this ability. You cannot choose yourself for Sinistry, so this ability has no use while soloing. This has a cooldown of 90 seconds, and while it might not be available for every pull, you should find every good opportunity to use this cooldown, as it will allow you to heal for massive amounts. Gravity will deal unaspected AoE damage with a potency of 200 to a target and all enemies around it. However, the second enemy will receive 10% less potency, the third 20% less, the fourth 30% less, the fifth 40% less, and all remaining enemies will only receive 50% potency of the attack. Similar to White Mage's Holy in terms of damage, Gravity is your only AoE damage ability as an Astrologian. Unlike Holy, this is a targeted spell, so you can use this from range. It costs less MP than Holy as well, but does not have the stun effect. This is great to use on large packs of enemies and to help with damage in speedruns. However, this does cost a lot of MP, so never spam this ability and run out of MP to cast heals. Malefic 2 deals unaspected damage to a target with a potency of 200. Once your damage over time effects are on the target, use this as filler damage over Malefic 1 as long as it is available at your current level. Time Dilation will extend any beneficial effects you place on a party member by 15 seconds. These effects can include regens, barriers, and card effects. This is extremely useful for extending the barrier card effects on party members and will probably be the main use for this ability. This sits on a 90-second cooldown. Collective Unconscious will create a bubble around you that will reduce the damage taken of all party members inside by 10% and add a regen effect to all party members that refreshes itself every 3 seconds for each party member inside. The regen of itself lasts for 15 seconds and heals 150 potency every 3 seconds for a total potency of 750, but recall that it will refresh continuously as long as you are standing inside. If you move or cast any spell with Collective Unconscious active, the effect will end. Also, a Collective Unconscious requires you to have a sect active, although you should always be using one anyway. This spell is awesome because Y'shtola uses it. And that's it. No, but seriously, it is a good spell with lots of potential, although the uses are kinda limited. Because this requires you to be in range of everyone you want to affect, and because it requires you to do nothing while it is active, Its best uses are during phases of a fight where the boss is untargetable and charging up for a large party-wide attack, which happens quite often in many boss fights actually. But outside of this use, it is difficult to find effective and efficient places to use this ability. And the final ability is Celestial Opposition. This will stun all nearby enemies for 4 seconds and will extend all beneficial effects you place on all nearby party members, including yourself, by 5 seconds. Recall what I said about Luminiferous Aether and how you should pair this up with it. Celestial Opposition has a cooldown of 2 minutes just like Aether and can help you squeeze out a little more MP from your Aether uses. Additionally, Celestial Opposition is great for extending region effects and card effects. With all of those abilities out of the way, we can finally take a good look at the 6 cards you can draw and use to help support your party, as well as the abilities that help enhance them. The Balance is arguably the most desired card, and this will increase the target's damage dealt by 10% for 30 seconds. Obviously, the DPS should get first priority on this card, but any party member currently doing damage can benefit from this if it is ever expanded. You can give this to any DPS really, although some like to focus on heavy hitters like melee DPS or casters. I will say something to keep note of: for jobs that use a lot of damage over time effects, such as summoners and scholars, if you do choose to give them this card, try to do so before they begin applying their damage over time effects. The Bull reduces the target's damage taken by 10% for 30 seconds. This card is mostly for the tanks, and honestly, it's a pretty great defensive cooldown. This can be expanded and used on the party to help with AoE damage, but mostly if you do choose to use this card, it'll be on one of the tanks. The Arrow will increase the target's attack speed by 10% for 30 seconds. This is another great DPS ability to give to any party member. It can actually be given to yourself as a healing cooldown as well to throw out heals a little faster. Keep in mind though, that this card can devastate a person's resources as it allows them to attack faster. However, I find that giving this to casters or ranged physical DPS to be the best option, as they have cast times and this can really help with their mobility if it is needed. Plus, black mages in particular have an infinite source of MP, so they will not become resource starved if given this card repeatedly. The Spear is an interesting card that many people don't fully understand. This card will place a buff on a party member that lasts for 20 seconds. If that party member uses an ability that is anything off of the global cooldown, it will reduce that ability's cooldown by 20%. So for instance, if you were to use this on yourself and use something like Luminiferous Aether with a default cooldown of 2 minutes, it would reduce its cooldown to 96 seconds, shaving off 24 seconds of that cooldown. This card could function a little better, and it is actually hard to get a good use of this card, since it is fairly difficult to keep track of everyone's individual cooldown timers. Chances are you'll be royal roading this card more often than not, but if you can somehow give this card to someone, like maybe a bard with a lot of damaging cooldowns, before they do their opener, it could see some decent use. Otherwise, it's like one of the weakest cards in the Astrologian's toolkit. The Ur will place an MP refresh on a party member. The potency is 30 and it lasts for 15 seconds. Now for actual numbers, it was calculated to give you 265 MP every 3 seconds, for a total of 1325 MP without any Royal Road enhancements. This doesn't seem like much, but getting this can help a lot with MP management and tight situations, especially if you can make it better with Royal Road. This is best used on yourself or the other healer, since black mages have an infinite amount of MP, summoners are actually really good with MP management now in the expansion, and Dark Knights actually cannot receive this card while in Darkside, which they should be at all times. You could possibly give this to a bard to help extend their full Requiem, but you'd probably increase your party DPS more by using a different card. This card really is mostly used for a support for healer MP management. And the Spire is the last card and will place a TP refresh on a party member. This will restore 30 TP every 3 seconds for 15 seconds for a total of 150 TP without any Royal Road enhancements. This doesn't really sound like a whole lot, but in long drawn out fights with no breaks in combat, this can really help Disciples of War make it to their 2nd or 3rd Invigorates. It can also be helpful on a Paladins and Dark Knights who have no way of restoring their own TP. However, in most casual content, the best use for this card will be to Royal Road it, as it will most likely never be needed. And those are your 6 cards. Let's really quickly look at some of the abilities I glossed over earlier. As I explained, using draw will allow you to draw one of those 6 cards. You'll have 15 seconds to do something with this card, which can be one of 6 things. You can use the card, obviously. That can be either on yourself or a party member. You can Royal Road the card and receive an enhancement effect on the next card you use depending on the card you Royal Road. Spread the card and save it to be used later. You can shuffle the card and draw a second time, keeping in mind you may get the same card again. You can manually move over your buffs and click off the card, causing it to wear off and putting draw on cooldown. Or, and this is the one thing that you should never do, you can wait 15 seconds and let the card wear off and put draw on cooldown. If you find that you draw a card and don't want to use or can't Royal Road, shuffle, or spread it, the best thing to do is to manually click it off just so you can get draw cooling down and cycle through more cards. And this can happen quite often actually. You'll have a card, you have spread it, or the card is not worth spreading, shuffling, or you have a Royal Road effect that you like and want to keep, and therefore you don't actually want to use the card. In this situation, you should just manually click it off. Spread is a helpful tool for saving cards for important phases of fights, or just for boss fights in general. You can source something that gives a nice boost of DPS, such as the balance or the arrow, get a Royal Road effect you like, and when the time is right, use it whenever you please. Something to keep in mind is that you can actually spread cards outside of an instance and still have it upon entering an instance. So if you really want to fish for a balance before your next raid or a dungeon, you can. However, keep in mind that if you have a card spread and then enter an instance that causes you to sink down in level, it will remove your spreaded card and also put spread on cooldown. So keep that in mind if you're doing certain duty roulettes. Shuffle is great for when you get a card you don't want or need at the moment and want to try for something else. Some people get really irritated that you can draw the same card you shuffled back into your deck, but it makes sense both from a logical view and from a balancing view. The balance of the Astrologian's cards is the RNG. Shuffle is just a way of testing your luck a second time and not trading a card for another, like some would like it to be. Time dilation can be used to extend the duration of card effects and any other beneficial effects you may have placed on a party member. You'll really want to use this cooldown on anything useful just to keep it cycling throughout a fight. Ideally, you'll want to extend things such as the balance or the arrow to help increase DPS, or I find extending the bowl on a tank who also has a regen aspected benefit to be another great way to use it. Celestial Opposition, similarly to Time Dilation, can extend every beneficial effect you placed on yourself or any party members around you by 5 seconds. This doesn't sound that much, but if you use an expanded card, this is a total extension of 20 seconds in a party of 4, or 40 seconds in a party of 8. Do not underestimate this ability, it has its uses if you know how to use it. And finally, we have Royal Road. I'm really going to dig deep into Royal Road, which is why I've kind of been saving it for last. But first off, we should talk about the effects you can get from Royal Roading each card. If you Royal Road the balance or the bowl, you'll get the enhanced Royal Road effect. That will work on the next card you use, whether that is a card you draw or the card you have spread. Enhanced Royal Road will increase the potency of your next card by 150%. So something like the balance that increases damage dealt by 10% will now be 15% for the same duration. If you Royal Road the arrow or the spear, you'll get the extended Royal Road effect, which will double the length of the next card you use. So for the balance again, that lasts for 30 seconds normally, it will now last for a full minute. And if you Royal Road the Ewer or the Spire, you'll get the expanded Royal Road, which will have the potency of the next card you use, but it will now be placed on all nearby party members in an AoE. Royal Road is a great tool for using cards that you don't see a good use for at the time they are drawn. You'll be using it a lot as an Astrologian. But now I really want to get into the math of Royal Road and which Royal Road effects are best in which situations. And to do this, I'm going to explain the math and reasoning I use when I use Royal Road. So first off, let's talk about using a card without Royal Road. We'll use everyone's favorite card again, the balance. If you use the balance with no Royal Road effects on a DPS, that DPS now has a 30 effectiveness balance. It is 30 effectiveness because they will be getting the original potency of the card for 30 seconds. And that is, I guess, the measurement I'll be using. Now let's start adding things to the mix. Without any Royal Road effects, you can further extend the duration of this balance with time dilation, making it 45 effectiveness since it is the same base potency with now lasting for 45 seconds. And then you can again extend the total second time with Celestial Opposition for a total of 50 seconds or 50 effectiveness since it is the original base potency that lasts for 50 seconds. Now let's look at adding some Royal Road effects. The enhanced Royal Road will increase the potency of the balance by 150%. So now you're getting 1.5 effectiveness for every second for 30 seconds, and that is a total of 45 effectiveness. If you then extend this with time dilation, you'll get 1.5 effectiveness for 45 seconds, for a total of 67.5 effectiveness. And then with Celestial Opposition added on top of that, you'll get 1.5 effectiveness for 50 seconds for a total of 75 effectiveness. And that is the most effectiveness you can get with this Royal Road effect, which is pretty good. It lasts for the same amount of time of 50 seconds and has an additional 25 effectiveness added onto it. Now the extended Royal Road will double the duration of the balance, so you are now getting 1 effectiveness for 60 seconds, so 60 effectiveness. With time dilation and Celestial Opposition adding an additional 20 seconds, that totals up to an 80-second duration for a total of 80 effectiveness. This has 5 more effectiveness than Enhanced Royal Road, but takes another 30 seconds to be fully utilized. And finally, the most difficult to calculate, the Expanded Royal Road will have the potency of the card, but also spread it to all nearby party members. So, just calculating it in the simplest way possible, each party member will be getting 0.5 effectiveness for 30 seconds. In a light party of 4, that totals up to be 60 effectiveness, and in a full party of 8, that can reach up to 120 effectiveness. That is without taking into account time dilation or Celestial Opposition yet. If we add Celestial Opposition, assuming it hits every party member, we'll be extending the total amount of seconds the card lasts for each party member. In a light party, that is an additional 20 seconds, and for a total of 140 seconds. In a full party, that is an additional 40 seconds for a total of 280 seconds. And then regardless of who you use time dilation on, this will add a flat 15 seconds to both party sizes. Now a light party will have 155 seconds total of a card's duration, and a full party will have 295 seconds total of the card's duration. Multiply this by 0.5 and we get 72.5 effectiveness in a light party of 4, and we get 147.5 effectiveness in a full party of 8. So to recap, since enhanced and extended Royal Road effects only work on one person, it will have the same effectiveness regardless of party size, and that is 75 and 80 effectiveness respectively. In light parties of 4 party members, an expanded Royal Road will give 72.5 effectiveness, and in a full party of 8, an expanded Royal Road can give 147.5 effectiveness at maximum. That is very important. These numbers are the absolute maximum effectiveness you can achieve, and these are important things to keep in mind. If we continue with using the balance in this example, with the expanded Royal Road effects in particular, not all party members can benefit from the full effects of these card effects at all times, at least not with the balance. Unless you are literally hitting a striking dummy, there will be mechanics that cause you to stop attacking for a bit. Healers do need to throw out heals, believe it or not, and can't full-time DPS during the entire duration of the card. That is why these numbers are considered maximum effectiveness. Extended Royal Road may seem slightly better than Enhanced Royal Road, but remember that Extended Royal Road takes 30 seconds longer to get its full use, and that is a longer window for possible combat inactivity. So keep all of these things in mind. The bottom line is, all Royal Road effects are good in their own way. Each has their advantages and disadvantages. Expanded Royal Road seems much better than all the rest while in a full party situation, but remember that only the balance, the arrow, and I guess the spear are really the only viable cards to use in an AoE situation. The bow is only useful if people are taking constant AoE damage, and even then it's barely worth it, and not everyone uses MP or TP for the Ewer or the Spire to even come close to that maximum effectiveness number. So keep all of this in mind. This was kind of a long section of the guide and there were a lot of numbers, so hopefully I explained it simply enough for you to understand. It's kind of understandable if you don't. I'll really try to maybe add in some numbers on screen to help explain what I'm talking about. So moving on, we've talked a lot about Astrologian's abilities, but now we need to talk about cross-class abilities. You'll have access to 5 of these abilities and can pull abilities from Conjurer and Thaumaturge. From Conjurer, you can take Cure, Arrow, Cleric Stance, Protect, Raise, and Stone Skin. From Thaumaturge, you can take Surecast, Blizzard 2, and Swiftcast. You'll never need Cure or Raise as you already have your own abilities that do these things more effectively. So now let's look at the other 7 abilities. Arrow will deal wind damage with a potency of 50 and will add a damage over time effect that deals 25 potency every 3 seconds for 18 seconds. Total potency is 200 and it is instant cast. Now 200 potency is the same amount of potency as Malefic 2, although this does cost less MP. This ability is not mandatory, but it can let you get out a little more damage from your MP. Cleric Stance is a permanent buff that when switched on will swap your intelligence and mind stats while increasing the potency of all your damage abilities by 10% and reducing the potency of your healing abilities by 20%. This is a very important ability as it allows you to deal decent damage when active while keeping your healing abilities close at hand with the switch of a single button. Learn how to properly move in and out of this stance to deal damage and still fulfill your healing duties. After turning on Cleric Stance, you must wait 5 seconds before turning it off. So if you know that you will have to cast heals within the next 5 seconds, you should not turn this on. Also, when turning off Cleric Stance, if you are spamming the button, it is very possible to turn it off and immediately turn it back on if you are not careful, so do not mash this button. This ability is pretty much mandatory as your damage will be pretty much awful without it. Protect is a defensive buff that will be casted on you and all party members around you for 30 minutes. It increases the physical and magical defense of everyone it hits. This should be casted on everyone before a dungeon or fight begins and should be kept up throughout the rest of the run, assuming the run lasts for longer than 30 minutes. If someone dies and is revived, it is up to you if you want to recast this buff on them. It will help their survivability, but will also cost even more MP than the initial revive itself. This ability is also mandatory, although if you are doing content with another healer, you could opt to take something else, although I would just stick to saying that this is pretty much a mandatory ability. Stone Skin is a defensive buff that will absorb 10% of a maximum target's HP before it is broken. Stone Skin will last for 30 minutes or until it is broken. Also, since this is based off a target's maximum HP, this does scale with the target you are casting it on rather than your own gear. This can be a great tool for reducing big spike damage or keeping players with weakness or less gear alive during high damage phases. It is good practice to have this casted on all party members before each pull, although this is not always necessary. You can attempt to cast this on the tank before each pull, although it may be easier to just switch to Nocturnal Sec and cast Aspect to benefit on them for the barrier as you are moving in between pulls. Also keep in mind that this can stack with the barrier effect, so if you really want to double down, you can. I would like to say that this is mandatory, but it is very possible to get away without ever using it. But still, if you're serious about healing, you should take the time to get this ability. Surecast will ensure your next cast will finish without being interrupted. This sets on a 30-second cooldown. Taking certain damaging attacks can sometimes interrupt your casts, and using this to negate the interruption can make a big difference in how caught up you are on heals. There are definitely notable places to use this ability, and oftentimes I am guilty of underutilizing this ability. This is a good tool to have, but I do not consider it mandatory on Astrologian, simply because Astrologian has access to light speed, which can essentially fulfill the same role indirectly. But I won't say not to take it, as it does have its uses, and light speed is a good tool that can be used in other places if you can use Surecast instead. Blizzard 2 deals 50 potency ice damage in an area around you and binds targets for 8 seconds. Really kind of a pointless ability, but it is worth making note of for its bind effect, although I'm pretty sure you'll never need or take this ability. And finally, Swift Cast will allow you to instantly cast any spell and sits on a 60-second cooldown. This ability is mandatory for healing, casual or not. Get this ability. This will allow you to cast any clutch spell while moving, although like we discussed before, light speed is great for doing this as well. However, Swiftcast's most famous use, which is reviving dead party members, is something that Lightspeed's 2.5 second cast reduction can't fully negate with a sensed cast time being 8 seconds. All in all, Swiftcast is a great and versatile tool. So those are the cross-class abilities that I recommend. In the order I take them, that would be Protect, Cleric Stance, Swiftcast, Stone Skin, and then your fifth, you can take either Arrow or Surecast, whichever you prefer. In order to get all of these abilities, you must level Conjurer to 34 and Thaumaturge to 26. And with those abilities all out of the way, there's something I want to touch on really quickly, and that is Overhealing and Precasting. Overhealing is just what it sounds like, and that is healing for more HP than the missing HP of a party member. Doing this over and over in a fight can give you a lot of unnecessary enmity and can be very inefficient with your MP. Regen effects usually aren't a huge problem since they heal over a long period of time, and they are usually pretty MP efficient. Casting larger spells like Benefit 2 to heal a small portion of health can really be overboard, so try your best to limit overhealing. And Precasting, which is the act of preemptively casting a healing spell to deal with damage you know or suspect is coming. This will allow the damage to be taken sometime in the middle of your cast, and your heal should land a moment later. A lot of times, a boss's cast bar or animations will alert you of when big spike damage may be coming, and precasting a heal can do a lot for keeping you caught up on healing. Precasting can also be used in a DPSing manner, such as casting Combust 2 as the tank is moving in to pull the boss. Precasting is a great tool for any caster job to learn. Now, let's move into healing techniques. Remember that healing is done on a case-by-case basis, and that your experience with healing one piece of content will never be the same as the last. People may be different, jobs may be different, there are a lot of varying factors to keep in mind as you heal. Being a healer will require lots of perception, and you cannot tunnel vision on any one task, especially on Astrologian. You will need to keep an open mind and a watchful eye on the whole situation to get a good grasp on where the fight is currently progressing and where it may soon lead. Keep an eye on your tank and what cooldowns they are using, and if they are in their tank or DPS stance. This should help you determine how much damage they will be taking and how much healing you'll need to focus onto them. If your off tank is about to pick up adds soon, you'll need to prepare to split your attention between the two. And if there are certain fight mechanics that cause other party members to take damage, you need to be ready to deal with that as well. And if there are no notable spikes in damage in the near future, this is when you can consider turning on Cleric Stance to add a bit of DPS. My preferred style of healing is a balance of being safe and making sure no one dies, but also finding good opportunities to deal damage, sometimes taking reasonable risks to squeeze in another damaging spell or two, if I have the right spells or abilities to mitigate the prolonged halt of heals. My personal mindset as a healer is to ensure that no one dies and that no one is hindered by any detrimental effects. That's it. Your party's HP bars do not need to be filled at all times, and if they don't need their full HP to survive any incoming spikes of damage, you can get away with dealing more damage. Regardless if your party member is at 100% HP or 10%, they still have their full capabilities as long as they are not completely killed. As a newer healer, you'll probably want to take as little risks as possible, but as you become more confident and comfortable with a fight, you'll find that you can take more acceptable risks in favor of dealing more damage. However, there are limits, and you need to keep in mind that you are a healer, not a DPS, and your first priority and responsibility is your party's well-being. If you are a healer that thinks it is acceptable to burn all of your MP DPSing and not have anything left to heal, then why are you even healing? Just go play DPS in that point. Being able to add DPS is a part of being a great healer, but if you're failing at your healing responsibilities and people die, you are setting your party back more than the little amount of DPS you think you're adding with that reckless addition of damage. Now let's get back to healing. For single target healing, I like to make sure the tank has some form of damage shield, whether that be Stone Skin, Nocturnal Aspect of Benefit, or both. Having these things will let the tank secure more enmity before I even have to cast my first heal, and it can also let me to throw out a few damaging spells at the start of a fight. Now here is where things can get a bit different on Astrologian from other healers. You can choose whether you want to heal in Diurnal or Nocturnal Sect, but you must decide before the pull starts, as you cannot switch inside of combat. Regardless if you choose diurnal, I still highly recommend switching to nocturnal in between pulls to add that shield. But now the question is, which sect should you choose? Well, I will say diurnal is definitely the stronger of the sects for PvE healing. The amount of healing the regions can provide are so much more healing barrier effects that nocturnal sect can provide. The 5% attack speed bonus of diurnal works on both healing and damaging spells, where the 5% healing potency of nocturnal only works on healing spells. I mostly only use nocturnal if I am paired with another Astrologian that is already in diurnal sect. So forgive me, but most of my healing tips will be assuming that you are in diurnal sect. Now as the pull progresses, I will keep in mind how much damage the tank is taking, what cooldowns they use, if any, and how much more damage they'll be taking as I cast my heal. Assuming they are taking a moderate amount of damage, I'll usually cast Benefict or Benefict 2 and follow it up with Aspected Benefict for the regen effect. If I feel the regen can deal with most of the incoming damage, I'll usually jump into Cleric stance for a little while to deal damage, keeping an eye on the rate at which my tank's HP is depleting, out of Cleric stance when I need to heal again. It is a balancing act of moving in and out of Cleric stance to deal damage and throw out the proper amount of healing needed. Towards the end of the pull, you can begin pre-casting Stone Skin on the tank so it is ready for the next pull, as most tanks will not wait for you to cast this. You should also switch to Nocturnal if you are not already and apply an Aspected Benefict Faerie on them. Now, just Tsukimori, if you are in Nocturnal sect, you will have a lot less freedom to DPS safely, that is just a fact. Barriers can halt HP depletion momentarily, but that is it. Unlike Scholars who have the aid of their Faerie to help heal while they are in Cleric stance, you have no way of giving your tank extra heals while you are in Cleric stance, so your Cleric stance sessions will usually be very short while in Nocturnal sect. You don't want to use Aspected Benefict too much in Nocturnal, and you'll want to try to default back to Benefict as much as possible. I know it sounds like I'm really putting Nocturnal sect down, but it is clearly the weaker of the two sects for PvE healing. The tank should be the one taking the majority of the damage in any situation. DPS will also need healing depending on fight mechanics and their own ability to dodge. In the case that someone other than the tank takes damage, you'll need to make proper judgment and divide your attention between the party members who need heals. Keep in mind how the damage was taken. If it was mechanic based, and if that mechanic will happen again soon, make sure to heal the people who will be dealing with that mechanic again next. If it was avoidable damage, try to gauge why that person took that damage, whether it be lag, inexperience with the fight, or greediness with positional advantage, and then gauge if that reason will cause them to take the same damage again and heal accordingly. When lots of damage starts going out, and when party-wide damage hits the party, this is when you'll want to consider your AoE abilities. Your AoE options are pretty simple. Helios for small to moderate AoE damage, just to help get HP bars healthy again. Diurnal aspect of Helios for healing large amounts of damage over a period of time, or constant AoE damage. And Nocturnal aspect of Helios can be casted before the damage to give everyone a small barrier to eat some of the damage, or after the damage to help you and the other healer feel HP bars and momentarily halt any additional damage the party may take afterwards. Keep in mind you can cast Sinistry on the tank just to get that 20% healing potency increase on your AoE heals, as well as light speed to help mitigate the MP cost of the larger AoE spells. And if you find a good opportunity, Collective Unconscious can be used before the damage to help reduce the damage taken, and then give everyone a regen to help get their HP back to full. Now, we went this entire time talking about heals, but what about your cards? That's right, you're an Astrologian, and once every 30 seconds, you have an extra thing to divide your attention to. Each card you draw requires some amount of judgment and quick thinking, and you really don't want to linger on any one card too long and delay your heals or your next card draw. My recommendation for using cards in battle is to use draw, and then as the animation is going off, continue with your next heal or damaging spell. Once you see what the card is, you'll have a split second as you're waiting for your spell's cast to finish. In this time, try to gauge what you want to do with the card. One of the 5 things I told you to do, which is to use it, Royal Road, shuffle, spread, or click off the card. If you cannot decide in that time, begin casting your next spell and use this extra time to think of something. If you really can't think of anything you really want to do with the card, Royal Road it. That should be your default option if you really just can't think of anything you really want to do with it. It won't affect your party in any way, and it will benefit your next card, and get the card coming faster with the draw now on cooldown. It may overwrite a previous Royal Road effect, although there's a 33% chance it was the same effect anyway. And now we need to talk about MP management and conservation. Since Benefic 2 and Helios actually cost slightly less MP than their counterparts on White Mage, and Gravity costs less MP than Holy, Astrologian's emphasis on MP management isn't as crucial as the White Mage, but the point of the matter is that you need MP to heal, so you still can't run out of MP. Now, I'll say that Diurnal Sect is the more MP efficient sect of the two, again just because the region effects heal for much more than the small healing potency boost and the barrier the Nocturnal Sect offers. If possible, you should try to use nothing but Benefic and Diurnal Aspect to Benefic throughout a fight, only using other spells if special conditions are met that validate their use. Helios, Aspect to Helios, and Benefic 2 all use considerably more MP and are less efficient in MP per potency, so really only use these if you think they are needed. Don't use Stone Skin too often in combat as it costs even more than Benefic 2 to cast, and only use Exalted Detriment on important detrimental effects. Using Lightspeed can also reduce MP cost of all of your spells, remember, and making your spells more potent with Sinistry can save you some casts. As for restoring your MP, you have several ways of doing so. The most obvious is Luminiferous Aether, which I also recommend pairing with Celestial Opposition to increase its effectiveness. You also have the Ur card if it is drawn, but since it is a complete chance if you draw this, you shouldn't ever use MP and rely on drawing an Ur later to make up that MP. You have access to Ethers as well, which have actually been buffed considerably in patch 3.1 and are actually somewhat viable to use. They increase a small amount depending on the grade of Ether you use and have really long cooldowns, but if you need that extra MP badly, these can provide you with enough MP to get off a few more spells. You can also use Mind Potions instead to increase your heal strength or the strength of your damaging spells while in Cleric stance, although I do tend to prefer Ethers now. And aside from those things you can do, Bards can sing Mage's Ballad, and Machinists can promote the turrets to restore your MP at the cost of their damage, so while they can help, you'll want to try and avoid needing it if you can for the sake of party damage. I touched briefly on it already, but I want to go a little more in depth with DPSing as an Astrologian. You should be in Cleric stance to do the most damage, although if you are still in the learning process, you can keep it off, although as you progress higher and higher in level, non-Cleric stance damage becomes more and more negligible. For single target damage, apply Combust to Combust and Arrow if you have it, and then use Malefic or Malefic 2 as filler, reapplying your damage over time effects as they start to wear off. You can use Balance or the Arrow to increase your DPS, although unless it is expanded, you'll probably want to use this on the actual DPS in your party. For AoE damage, you only have Gravity. I'd recommend using Gravity once or twice to eat up some MP, and then using Luminiferous Aether and Celestial Opposition for the MP refresh. This stun can help with damage mitigation as well, and the rest of your Gravity casts will produce less enmity due to Aether's secondary effect. Have Stone Skin and Nocturnal Barrier on the tank before the pull, and Diurnal regens while you're in Cleric to help offset damage while you're not healing. Have Essential Dignity, Lightspeed, or Sinistry handy to help catch up on healing once your Cleric stance session is over, and if you need to heal in the next 5 seconds, don't turn on Cleric stance and start DPSing. You are a healer and you need to fulfill your healing responsibilities first and foremost. And lastly, yes, Astrologian's DPS capabilities are pretty lackluster compared to the other two healers, and the reason for this is because they can increase the party's DPS, which is something the healers really can't do. Scholar's Celine can give everyone a 3% attack speed buff every 30 seconds, but that's it. An Astrologian can provide so much more party DPS and support with their cards, so even if you feel like you're not doing a whole lot of DPS, you really are doing quite a bit indirectly by buffing your party. And now we can talk about my personal view on stats and my priority and my believed effectiveness. This will be nearly identical to my White Mage guide, as it is pretty much the same mentality. Weapon damage is the most important and weighted stat to your healing and damage. Never sacrifice this for anything else. Mind increases your healing potency and will be your main stat as a healer. Your 35 attribute points should be spec'd into this stat. Mine will naturally increase with the gear's item level, so you shouldn't have to worry about this stat too much. Accuracy will affect your chance to hit a target with damaging abilities. Keep in mind that you cannot miss a heal, and this stat is only useful for dealing damage. There is no accuracy on the current Heavensward gear for healers, which means that there is actually a reasonable chance you will miss your attacks. Combust and Combust 2, your damage over time effects, thankfully can bypass accuracy requirements, but every other spell can miss. To gain extra accuracy, you can either wear crafted gear and meld accuracy into it, or eat accuracy food, although unless you are serious about endgame progression, I wouldn't recommend using the guild on these things for more casual content. Piety will increase your MP pool and affects how much MP you gain passively inside and outside of battle. You will gain 6% of your maximum MP every 3 seconds outside of battle and 2% inside of battle. While it doesn't seem like a whole lot, it adds up over the course of a fight, or in the time between pulls. If you stack a bunch of Piety and rarely use most of your MP though, you're wasting the potential for other stats. You should try your best to strike a balance of Piety and other stats, and while I won't say Piety is bad, having too much can take away from the other stats. Spell speed reduces the cast time of your spells and the potency of your healing and damage over time abilities. It does take a lot of spell speed stacking to feel the effects of the reduced cast times, but since Diurnal Sect has a built-in attack speed buff, it is a little easier to feel that. This is a great stat as it allows Diurnal Sect regens to heal more and let your damage over time effects deal more damage. It also allows you to react to damage a little bit quicker. Determination increases damage and healing dealt by a small amount. This is a flat and static increase to your healing and damage, and it is a solid stat for any job in the game. You can't go wrong with Determination. And critical hit rate is the last and my least favorite of the secondary stats for Astrologian. It increases the rate of critical healing or damage dealt, as well as the amount of critical healing and damage dealt. This stat is unreliable for healing, as it may crit a heal when you don't want or need it to, and you can't guarantee a critical heal when you need or want one. If you need a bigger heal, you'll use a bigger heal like Benefic 2, or use a cooldown like Sinistry, and not cast Benefic and hope that it crits. There's no benefit other than the potential of critically healing or damage on Astrologian, and I see no point in investing in this unreliable stat for that reason alone. And those are my view on the stats. You do not have to agree with me, and it is completely possible to heal all content in the game no matter what secondary stats you decide to use, provided you have the skill to do so. And that's all of the main content of this guide. I have a few more tips to give out here at the end, but a lot of these are in my White Mage guide as well, so I won't spend nearly as much time on it this time. Know the fights. This is pretty self-explanatory. Know the timing of damage, when you can deal more damage, when you need to heal more, when people are more likely to take avoidable damage. It goes a long way to getting through each encounter smoothly. Know the other jobs. This is something I recommend all players do, and that's have a basic understanding and knowledge of each job and the way they play. Knowing what cooldowns they use and what they do, knowing where they're most likely to stand and position themselves, it can really help with understanding why and how they might take more damage in certain places and phases of fights. Coordinate with your other healer. In content that has a second healer, try to set clear responsibilities for both of you to follow and avoid overlapping. This can be things such as healing assignments, dispelling certain effects, and other things depending on fight mechanics. Practice with random groups and duty finder groups. While you'll be most comfortable healing with your friends or in your static, venturing into random groups and testing your reaction and adaptability can help you when you go to tackle more challenging content when it is new and fresh. Don't wait to use your cards. This is very important for an Astrologian, and I must stress that you really want to use your cards as soon as possible. The longer you delay using a card, the longer it takes to get your next one, and the more card draws you'll potentially lose out in a fight. If you really can't think of anything to do with the card, when in doubt, Royal Road it and move on. And lastly, healing is not easy, and not for everyone. Healing has become increasingly more difficult in the expansion, I feel, with Savage causing the community to place a bigger emphasis on party DPS, pushing healers to use Cleric stance more often, and for tanks to use their DPS stances more. While this is a topic built into itself, healing has become a very difficult role to play, and adjust to with the speed that some groups like to go at. The playstyle of a lot of the community requires placing more stress and burden on healers to get things done faster, and it is something that one has to accept and learn to adapt to if they want to play a healer. Personally, it's gotten tiring seeing this method of doing things grow more and more common, but again, that is a rant for another video. Just know if you are planning on playing a healer, it is a difficult role, and you won't find much helpfulness or appreciation from other players as you move into random groups. Healers have the most responsibility of any other party member, and no one has the power to carry players like a healer can. It can be a great feeling to be a good and dependable healer, so if you are set on healing, be determined. This is something I personally recommend, but have something other than a healer level that you can switch to and play. Healing can be tiring, and dealing with all the players you meet can really wear you down and make you want to stop playing. If you begin to feel that way, take a break from the game or try playing a different role. I'm not lying when I say I've considered quitting healing before, but I stick with it because while healing can be annoying and stressful sometimes, I love being a healer, if that makes sense. And with that final note, that is the end of this guide. This was a pretty lengthy video, so if you stayed this long, I hope you enjoyed and you were able to learn something to help you along with playing Astrologian. It is definitely a challenging job to master, so if you have any further questions you'd like to ask me, be sure to comment below. I will always try to answer a question whenever I am not busy. My name is Tsuki, and my full name is Fyuria Tsukimori on the Faerie server. If you enjoyed this guide, please consider liking and subscribing to help support me and what I do. This guide did take quite a while to make, but now that it's finally here, I hope it helped you guys out. So until the next video, thank you for watching, and I'll see you all again. Bye bye.